They say memory is the only thing you truly own when you get old. Everything else, your strength, your independence, your dignity, it all gets stripped away, piece by piece, until you're left sitting in a chair that isn't yours, in a room that smells like disinfectant and defeat, watching the world forget you exist. I'm 83 years old now, and I've learned that the cruelest thing about aging isn't the aching joints or the failing eyesight. It's watching the people you loved most become strangers, who look at you like you're already a ghost. My name is Margaret Eleanor Ashford, though nobody calls me that anymore. The nurses here call me Maggie, like I'm a child or a pet. My daughter calls me Mother when she remembers to call at all. But there was a time when people called me Meg, when my husband would whisper it against my hair in the morning light, when my children would shout it from the backyard, their voices bright as church bells. That feels like someone else's life now, like a movie I watched long ago and can barely remember the plot. I never thought I'd end up here, in Sunset Grove Assisted Living Facility. What a name, as if the sunset is something gentle and beautiful instead of the last gasp of light before darkness swallows everything whole. But I suppose nobody plans to end up in a place like this. You don't mark it on your calendar, circle the date when your own flesh and blood will decide you've become too much trouble, too much of a burden, too much of a reminder that they too will grow old and unwanted someday. It was my daughter Rachel who put me here. My only child, the baby girl I carried for 9 months, whose first word was mama, who I rocked through countless midnight fevers and teenage heartbreaks. She came to my house on a Tuesday morning in September, and I remember thinking how tired she looked, how the lines around her mouth had deepened into permanent grooves of disappointment. She had her husband Marcus with her, a man who always looked at me like I was an expired coupon he couldn't quite throw away. "Mum, we need to talk," Rachel said, and those 4 words landed in my chest like stones. Nothing good ever follows those 4 words. We sat in my living room, the same living room where her father and I had celebrated 37 Christmases, where we'd hosted birthday parties and anniversaries, where he'd taken his last breath 5 years ago while I held his hand and begged him not to leave me alone in this world. The afternoon light came through the lace curtains, the ones I'd hung in 1978, and I watched the dust motes dance in the golden beams, while my daughter told me I couldn't live in my own home anymore. She had reasons, of course. She always had reasons. I'd left the stove on twice in the past month. I'd fallen in the bathroom and couldn't get up for 20 minutes. I'd forgotten to take my blood pressure medication for 3 days straight. She spoke in that patient, condescending tone that people use when they've already made up their minds and are just going through the motions of pretending you have a choice. Marcus nodded along like a bobblehead doll, occasionally adding phrases like, "It's for the best," and "You'll be safer there," as if safety was something worth having when it came wrapped in loneliness and surrender. I tried to fight it, I really did. I told them I'd be more careful, that I'd set alarms for my medication, that I'd install grab bars in the bathroom, but Rachel just shook her head with that martyred expression she'd perfected over the years, the one that made it look like she was the one suffering, not me. "Mum, I can't keep worrying about you like this. I have my own life, my own family. Jason has soccer practice and band concerts, and Marcus is up for a promotion, and I can't keep rushing over here every time something happens. You need professional care. Professional care." As if love and duty could be outsourced to strangers in scrubs for minimum wage. But what choice did I have? I couldn't afford in-home care on my Social Security, and I'd already signed over power of attorney to Rachel years ago when her father was dying, when I was so deep in grief I couldn't think straight. She had control of everything, my finances, my medical decisions, my entire life reduced to signatures on legal documents I barely understood. So 2 weeks later, I found myself being packed up like unwanted furniture, my 83 years of accumulated life sorted into boxes marked keep, done it, and trash. They let me bring so little. A few photographs in frames, some clothes that fit in a single dresser, my mother's wedding ring that I wore on a chain around my neck, and a small wooden box that held the letters my husband had written me during the Korean War. Back when love was something you waited for, something you treasured. everything else. The china we'd received as wedding gifts, the furniture we'd saved for years to buy, the garden I'd tended for 4 decades, all of it stayed behind. Rachel promised she'd take care of it, which I knew meant she'd sell the house and pocket the money, probably use it for Jason's college fund or a new car or a vacation to somewhere with white sand beaches and umbrella drinks. Sunset Grove smelled like boiled vegetables and pine, soul and something else, something indefinable that I can only describe as the scent of people waiting to die. My room was on the 2nd floor, a space barely larger than a generous closet, with industrial blue carpeting and walls the color of old teeth. I had a bed, a dresser, a chair by the window that looked out onto a parking lot, and a small bathroom with railings everywhere like I was a circus performer learning to walk a tightrope. The first night, I lay in that narrow bed and listened to someone crying in the next room, a sound so broken and hollow it seemed to echo through the walls and settle in my bones. Rachel visited that first week, bringing Jason with her. My grandson was 16, all gangly limbs and bad posture, his eyes glued to his phone screen like it held the secrets of the universe. He barely looked at me, just mumbled, "Hey grandma," and then asked his mother how long they had to stay. Rachel tried to make conversation, asking if I'd made any friends, if I liked the food, if my room was comfortable. But her eyes kept darting to her watch, and I knew she was counting the minutes, until she could leave and feel like she'd done her duty. "The staff seems nice," she said, gesturing vaguely at nothing. "And there are activities. Bingo on Tuesdays, movie nights on Fridays. You should try to get involved, Mom. It'll be good for you. Bingo, movie nights." As if I were a child at summer camp instead of a woman being warehoused until death came to collect me. After that first visit, Rachel's appearances became increasingly sporadic. She'd call once a week, usually on Sunday evenings, conversations that lasted no more than 10 minutes, and consisted mostly of her talking about Jason's accomplishments and Marcus's work, and the new kitchen backsplash they were installing. She never asked how I really was, never wanted to hear about the reality of my days. The terrible food, the way the night nurse was rough when she changed the bedsheets, the man down the hall who screamed for his dead wife at 3 in the morning. The suffocating awareness that I'd been erased from the world I'd spent 8 decades building. 3 months passed like that. 3 months of sitting by my window watching seasons change without me, of forcing down lukewarm meals in a dining room where most of the residents couldn't remember their own names, of pretending to sleep during the night checks so the nurses wouldn't try to engage me in chipper small talk about television shows I didn't watch. I felt myself disappearing, becoming transparent, like a photograph left too long in the sun. It was during this time that I started buying lottery tickets. The facility had a small shop in the lobby that sold newspapers, candy, toiletries, and yes, lottery tickets. Every Wednesday, when they gave us our weekly allowance, $20 of my own money doled out like I was a child with an allowance, I'd shuffle down there and buy 5 Powerball tickets. The young woman at the register, Maria, would smile at me with genuine kindness, the only person in that building who looked at me like I was still human. "Maybe today's your lucky day, Mrs. Ashford," she'd say, and I'd smile back even though I didn't believe in luck anymore. I didn't buy the tickets because I thought I'd win. I bought them because it gave me something to do, something to hope for in a place where hope went to die. I'd sit in my chair by the window and study those little slips of paper, imagine what I'd do with millions of dollars. Not that I'd buy mansions or cars or any of the things lottery winners usually dream about. No, I'd buy my freedom. I'd hire lawyers to undo whatever legal cage Rachel had trapped me in. I'd get my own place again, somewhere small but mine, with a garden where I could grow tomatoes and roses. I'd leave this purgatory and spend whatever time I had left on my own terms. But those were just fantasies. Daydreams of a desperate old woman trying to keep her mind from collapsing in on itself. The winning ticket was purchased on December 14th, exactly 1 week after Rachel had come for her monthly visit. It had been a particularly painful hour. She'd brought papers for me to sign, something about selling my house, which had apparently been on the market since September. She needed my signature to close the deal, she explained, because even though she had power of attorney, The lawyers wanted my consent documented. I'd stared at that paper for a long time, my hand trembling as I held the pen, and I'd asked her what she was going to do with the money. Well, the house needs work before we sell, so some will go to repairs. And then we need to recoup the costs of this place, Mom. Do you have any idea how expensive Sunset Grove is? We're paying nearly $5,000 a month, and Jason will be applying to colleges next year, and tuition is astronomical these days. Don't worry though. There should be enough left to keep you comfortable here for a while. A while. Not forever. Just a while. And then what? I didn't ask because I was afraid of the answer. After she left, I'd felt something inside me crack, like ice breaking on a frozen lake. I'd sat alone in my room as the December darkness fell early, watching Christmas lights blink on in the parking lot below, and I'd cried for the first time since arriving at Sunset Grove. Not gentle tears, but great heaving sobs that came from somewhere so deep I didn't know I still had access to such profound grief. I cried for my husband, for the daughter I'd lost to her own selfishness, for the life I'd lived that seemed to mean nothing now, for the years ahead that stretched like an empty road with no destination. That weekend, feeling hollowed out and numb, I bought my usual 5 lottery tickets. I didn't check them right away. I never did. I'd let them sit in the wooden box with my husband's letters, mixed in with the past, and I'd check them whenever I felt like it, which was usually never. The numbers were drawn on Saturday night, December 17th, but I didn't know. I was eating dinner in the dining room, some kind of grey meat and overcooked vegetables, listening to Mrs. Patterson ramble about her son who never visited and wondering if this was all there was left. This twilight existence between life and death. It wasn't until the following Tuesday that I learned I'd won. Maria from the shop came to my room, something she'd never done before, her dark eyes wide with excitement. She was holding her phone, and her hands were shaking. "Mrs. Ashford," she said, her voice trembling, "do you still have your tickets from last week? The Powerball tickets?" I'd gestured to the wooden box on my dresser, confused by her urgency. She opened it carefully, reverently even, and pulled out the tickets, her fingers moving frantically as she checked numbers against whatever was on her phone screen. And then she started crying. Actually crying, tears streaming down her face as she looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. "You won," she whispered. "Mrs. Ashford, you won the Powerball. $62 million. I didn't believe her at first. I thought perhaps she'd made a mistake, or I was having some kind of stroke-induced hallucination. Or this was a cruel joke the universe was playing on a woman who'd already endured enough cruelty. But Maria showed me her phone, showed me the winning numbers, showed me how they matched perfectly with the numbers on one of my tickets. 6 little numbers that had just changed everything. $62 million. The news spread through Sunset Grove like wildfire. Within hours, everyone knew. The nurses suddenly became attentive. The director came to my room personally to congratulate me, and residents I'd never spoken to suddenly wanted to be my friend. But it was Rachel's phone call that I was waiting for. It came that evening, right after the local news had run a story about an elderly woman in a nursing home winning the lottery. They didn't use my name, but apparently Rachel had pieced it together. "Mom," her voice was strange, higher pitched than usual, almost breathless. "Mom, I just saw the news. Is it true? Did you really win the lottery?" $62 million, I said calmly, surprised by how steady my own voice sounded. "Before taxes, of course." There was a long pause, and I could practically hear her mind racing, calculating, planning how to get her hands on money that was finally, legally, completely mine. "Mom, that's incredible. That's wonderful. Listen, I'm coming down there right now. We need to talk about this. You're going to need help managing that kind of money. Financial advisors, lawyers, tax people. Marcus knows someone who could." "No," I said, and the word felt like a key turning in a lock that had been rusted shut for months. "What?" I said. "No, Rachel. I don't need your help." Another pause, this one sharper, more dangerous. "Mom, you can't be serious. You don't understand these things. You have power of attorney documents, remember. We're supposed to manage your affairs together. This is for your own good. I've already called a lawyer," I said, which was true. Maria had helped me find one, a woman named Patricia Chen who specialized in elder law and had a reputation for being fierce. Ms. Chen is reviewing the power of attorney documents. She seems to think that since I'm fully competent, which I am, despite what you've been telling yourself, I can revoke those documents. She also mentioned something interesting about fiduciary duty, and how you might have violated it by putting me here when there were other options. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. I imagined Rachel's face, the color draining from it, the calculations shifting from how to access my money to how to protect herself from legal consequences. Mom, I don't think you understand what you're saying. You're confused. This is exactly why you need someone to help you make decisions. You could be taken advantage of. People will come out of nowhere trying to get your money. The way you did. I asked quietly. The way you've been taking my social security checks to pay for this place while my house sits empty. The way you were planning to sell my home and use the money for Jason's college and your kitchen remodel. Yes, Rachel, I know about fiduciary duty now. Miss Chen explained it very clearly. I could hear her breathing, rapid and shallow. The sound of someone's carefully constructed world was crumbling. I was trying to help you. Everything I did was for you. No, I said, and my voice broke just slightly, a hairline fracture in the armor I'd built around my heart. Everything you did was for you. Because taking care of me would have been inconvenient. Because I didn't fit into your perfect life anymore. Because it was easier to lock me away and forget about me than to actually be my daughter. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, Rachel. I learned that when your father died, and you couldn't be bothered to visit more than twice in the first 6 months, because you were too busy with Jason's soccer schedule. I learned it when you put me in here, and stopped calling except when you needed something. And I learned it every single day for the past 3 months, while I sat in this room wondering if I'd done something terrible to make my own child abandon me. She was crying now, I could hear it. But I couldn't tell if it was genuine or performative. Maybe she didn't know either. Mom, please. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I made mistakes, I know I did. But I'm still your daughter. Can't we start over? Can't we fix this? And there it was, the question I'd been waiting for, the one that made my chest ache with a grief so profound it felt like drowning. Could we fix this? Could 3 months of abandonment be erased? Could years of taking me for granted be forgiven? Could I look at my daughter and not see the person who'd stripped away my autonomy and dignity when I was most vulnerable? I don't know. I said honestly. I truly don't know. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone, and I sat there in my little room, in my little chair by the window, and I felt something shifting inside me. Not quite joy, not quite relief, but something close to both. Power maybe, or possibility. The understanding that I wasn't finished yet, that there were still chapters left to write in this story. The next few weeks were chaos. Ms. Chen was brilliant, sharp as a blade and twice as determined. She filed paperwork to revoke the power of attorney, citing my clear competence and Rachel's questionable decisions. She also started investigating whether Rachel had mismanaged my finances, which as it turned out, she had. My social security checks had been going into an account Rachel controlled, and while she'd been paying Sunset Grove, she'd also been paying herself a monthly management fee that no judge had authorized. It wasn't quite theft, Ms. Chen explained, but it was close enough to make Rachel very nervous about potential legal action. Meanwhile, I claimed my lottery winnings. After taxes, I walked away with roughly $37 million. $37 million. I kept saying the number out loud to myself, trying to make it feel real. I'd lived my entire life worried about money. Whether we could afford the mortgage, whether there'd be enough for retirement, whether my social security would cover my medication. And now I had more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. The first thing I did was hire a private care nurse and rent a house. Not buy. Wasn't sure where I wanted to settle yet, and I liked the idea of keeping my options open. It was a small cottage by the ocean, with large windows and a garden that needed work and the sound of waves that lulled me to sleep at night. I left Sunset Grove on a Tuesday morning in January, exactly 3 months after I'd arrived, and I didn't look back. The second thing I did was set up trust funds. Not for Rachel. I wasn't ready to forgive her yet, and maybe I never would be. But for Jason, $2 million in a trust he couldn't access until he turned 25, with distributions for education in the meantime. Miss Chen helped me structure it so Rachel couldn't touch it, couldn't use it, couldn't manipulate him with it. Whatever mistakes my daughter had made, my grandson was still my blood, and he deserved a chance at a life not limited by financial stress. I also donated, quietly, anonymously, to organizations that helped elderly people afford in-home care, so they wouldn't end up in places like Sunset Grove, unless they truly needed specialized medical attention. I set up a scholarship fund at the hospital where my husband had died, for nursing students who wanted to work in hospice care. And I sent a substantial check to Maria, the young woman from the shop who'd been kind to me when kindness seemed extinct, along with a note thanking her for treating me like a human being. Rachel tried to visit once, about a month after I'd moved out. She showed up at my new house unannounced, probably expecting to find me confused and in need of rescue. Instead, she found me in the garden, dirt under my fingernails, my face turned toward the sun, looking healthier than I had in years. We sat on the porch and drank iced tea, and the silence between us was heavy with everything unsaid. "You look good, Mom," she said finally, and I could hear the surprise in her voice, maybe even a hint of resentment that I was thriving without her. "I am good," I replied. "Better than I've been in a long time." "I really am sorry," she said, and maybe she even meant it. "I handled everything wrong. I was overwhelmed and stressed, and I took the easy way out instead of figuring out what was best for you. I understand if you can't forgive me." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and I tried to find the little girl who used to climb into my lap and ask me to read her favorite story one more time. She was in there somewhere, beneath the tired eyes and the lines of worry and the weight of her own choices. But I couldn't reach her anymore. Too much had happened. Too much had broken. "I don't hate you," I said carefully. "But I don't trust you either, and maybe that's worse. Maybe that's the real tragedy of all this, not that you put me in that place, but that you made me doubt whether you ever really loved me, or just loved the idea of having a mother when it was convenient." She flinched like I'd struck her, and tears spilled down her cheeks. "I do love you, I always have. Then you have a funny way of showing it," I said, not unkindly, just honestly. "Love isn't just words, Rachel, it's actions, it's showing up, it's caring for someone even when it's difficult and inconvenient and expensive. Your father and I, we loved you with everything we had. We sacrificed, we struggled, we put you first always, and when I needed you to do the same for me, you couldn't be bothered." "I know," she whispered. "I know, and I have to live with that. But can't we try? Can't I make it up to you?" I thought about it, sitting there on my porch with the sound of the ocean in the background and the sun warm on my face. Could she make it up to me? Could anything undo those 3 months of abandonment? Those phone calls where she couldn't wait to hang up, that moment when she'd walked into my house and told me I couldn't live there anymore? "Maybe," I said eventually. "But it won't be easy, and it won't be fast, and it starts with you accepting that I don't need you to manage my life anymore. I'm perfectly capable of making my own decisions. If you can respect that, if you can learn to see me as a person instead of a problem to be solved, then maybe we can rebuild something. But it'll be on my terms this time, not yours." She nodded, wiping her eyes, and I felt a small crack in the wall around my heart. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the very beginning of a path toward it. That was 6 months ago. Rachel visits now, once a week, and we're learning how to talk to each other again. It's awkward and sometimes painful, but it's real in a way our relationship hasn't been in years. She brings Jason sometimes, and I've been getting to know my grandson, who's less addicted to his phone now, and actually quite funny when he's not hiding behind a screen. We make dinner together, walk on the beach, sit in comfortable silence. It's not perfect, and I don't know if it'll ever be what it was before, but it's something. I think about Sunset Grove sometimes, about the people still living there, waiting to die. I think about the lottery ticket I almost didn't buy, the numbers that changed everything, the week between winning and knowing that shifted the entire trajectory of the rest of my life. And I think about the strange mathematics of fate, how a few dollars and a few numbers can mean the difference between despair and hope, between imprisonment and freedom. But mostly I think about what I learned in those 3 months locked away from the world. I learned that resilience isn't about bouncing back. It's about finding new shapes when the old ones no longer fit. I learned that family isn't just blood, it's choice and commitment and showing up even when it's hard. I learned that money doesn't buy happiness, but it can buy agency, and sometimes agency is the only thing standing between you and complete helplessness. And I learned that it's never too late to reclaim your life, even when you're 80, 3 years old and the world has written you off as finished. I'm sitting on my porch now, watching the sun set over the ocean, a real sunset, not the pathetic metaphor of that nursing home's name. The sky is painted in shades of orange and pink and purple, and there's a pot of tomato plants growing beside my chair, their greens smell rich and alive. In my lap is the wooden box with my husband's letters, and I'm reading one from 1953, his handwriting still clear after all these years. Whatever happens, Meg, remember that you're stronger than you know. Don't ever let anyone make you forget that. I didn't forget my love. It just took me a while to remember. The phone rings. Rachel, calling to confirm dinner plans for tomorrow. I answer, and her voice is warm, genuinely warm, asking how my day was, telling me about Jason's college acceptances, sharing her life instead of just performing the duty of a phone call. And as I listen to my daughter, I realize that this is the twist I never saw coming, not that I won the lottery, but that in losing everything, I found out exactly how much I was worth, and it had nothing to do with $62 million. It had everything to do with refusing to disappear,